Where did you grow up?
I am from Chile, native from here in the south. So my family comes from agricultural background. I also grew up in Santiago, which is the capital. It's a very centralized country. So at the end, if you really want to study and be in the kind of best places, you need to go to the city, which it seems that is something, a trend everywhere, the urbanization of life, which I'm completely against. I think we need to be more in the wild and be more in nature, because this is where we thrive better. In a way, we thrive. And then I studied journalism and history as 2 BAs. And I was a journalist on political economy for a while in Chile. And then I went to the US to study at NYU in New York, a master's in Latin American studies, but focused on the constituent revolutions of the 21st century in like what is called the pink tide. So this kind of left-wing populist governments that wanted to recreate the constitution in order to make more participatory and plurinational and include things like the right to nature. So I studied that, and then I switched to constitutional theory and philosophy, because basically what we have even there is not really completely correct, in the sense that it's only giving voice to the people, not real power. So I think that is where we are lacking and we need to work on. So it has been kind of a long arc of studying, from the kind of more empirical and kind of what happens in the current affairs to what we could imagine. And therefore it has to be something that is not really grounded on what is happening now, but it needs to be imagined. So that's why kind of philosophy and theory.
Okay. If correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like the only country that has been able to change the constitution is Bolivia, right?
No, so the 3 countries that underwent this change. The first one was Venezuela with Hugo Chavez in '99. So he was elected in '98 in a landslide, and then he and with the platform of changing the constitution, and that procedure was kind of participatory, but more kind of party based. So it was more about kind of being a Chavista instead of being a citizen, if you will. It's a very, on paper, is very, it focuses on pluralism. It's very participatory. It has quotas for indigenous people and, Afro descendants. So it is pretty good on paper, but because of the polarization of the country, it didn't have like too good press, I would say. Chavez is really a figure that has been demonized, especially in the United States. So then it came Bolivia and then Ecuador. And both of these countries have a very important portion of their citizens are from indigenous descent, who come from a more kind of local government and local assembly kind of organization in their own communities. So these 2 constitutions, the Bolivian and the Ecuadorian, are very progressive, because they actually kind of merge this kind of Western and indigenous culture. And they have a very interesting thing that happened, that they both recognize as kind of a supreme principle, like an organizing principle of the constitution, which is the good life, what is called in Spanish, el buen vivir. The idea that everything has to be there to assure not only welfare, like things, but actually that things are meaningful, and we can live kind of a holistic life that is more balanced and in nature, not against nature, not extracting from nature, but basically within the same ecosystem. So it's very interesting, and it's still being kind of worked out. The constitutions were approved, but then the hard work starts after you have like a kind of like a playing field. Then you start materializing, and the struggle starts of the people making use of their rights and pushing against states that could be very extractivist, because these countries are also kind of like based on the extraction of oil or gas, which cause disruption at the local level. So this kind of comes into conflict with a kind of more welfare-based progressive government, and the communities then being hurt on the ground with this extraction.
What made you want to write the book?
first is systemic corruption, not systematic, which is
sorry.
yes, it is a common mistake in terms of not mistake, but kind of like how can we think about it? Because what is systematic is something that happens in intervals of time, and kind of like it happens all the time. Systemic is to do with the system, how the system works. So of course, corruption can be systematic, but what I refer to is systemic, because it is related to the constitution, to the order of how we organize power in our republics. So I argue that basically the governments that we call democracies today are from the beginning were thought of very elitist kind of governments, authorized by the people, but the people are far away from government. So they are, as systems of politics are prone to corruption, because what happens is the elites are policing themselves, basically. Congress police the president, the judicial branch polices, the president and the Congress, and it is among elites basically that they police themselves, and we as citizens just authorize them. So what made me write this book is actually my own country, because it's very interesting that first, the democracy in the United States is the first democracy. Okay, I say this with quotes, because it is not really a democracy; it's a republic, in the sense that it's representative government, because the people have no control over power. So therefore, democracy is what the ancients call the kind of control of the people over power, over government. So it is seen as a democracy, and many of the countries around the world have copied kind of the organization of power, of representative government that sprung from the US. And in my own country, Chile, we had a democracy for very long, and then we had a coup in '73, which was against the president Salvador Allende, and the CIA was behind, and funding basically the military and the kind of right-wing politicians that wanted, and CEOs and the company guys that wanted to take over. So that constitution, the constitution that we have now in democracy after dictatorship is over, was designed and written during the dictatorship. So even though it has been reformed like 240 something times, little things and big things have been amended many times, it basically is the same document. And of course, for me, coming of age in this country with a kind of a protected democracy, with this constitutional structure that institutionalized neoliberalism. So it was very, and we can talk more about this, how can this, our own system also has kind of economic premises built into the juridical framework, into law. So for me, it was obvious that at some point in our history, we needed to change that document that was designed by the dictator, right? So I wanted to study what was the best, most democratic way to change that constitution, and therefore started educating myself on the constituent processes that actually happened in history, and what were the limitations and possibilities. And I understood that all the process of change has always been representatives, in the sense that we select others better than us to write the rules of the game. And this has been everywhere in the world. And there's no reason for this today, because when representative government was created, we didn't have really technology as we have today. So it was impossible really to articulate popular power and be connected. And basically people making decisions and kind of pitching in with ideas and all this, participation that they call today, that is just voice. Before, if you think about the political power, has to be with vote and with power inside the structure. So if we're going to think about a good form of government, the best way to create this government is also through the ground, from the ground up, where people are invested. And we have today the technological tools to do it. So my endeavor was to first figure out how it was done, what was the problems and the limitations, and then think about outside of the box of how to do it in a more democratic manner. So when it came the time for Chile to change its constitution, I would be ready, basically, with something to offer to people that wanted to do it. And as it happens, last year, October 2019, it was called the uprising in Chile. So there was an uprising against neoliberal policies and austerity and basically this precarity capitalism, this idea that the majority of people living middle class is not hollowed out. It's just so precarious that they're one paycheck away from destitution, basically. So increasing the metro fare created this movement of civil disobedience that turned into a massive movement and protest and of course repression from the state. And this basically opened up at the end a process of constitutional change. So this year in October, the Chileans voted for initiating this process. And of course, as it all happens, the powers that are started to co-opt the process. So immediately they created this kind of elitist project that would be completely disengaged from popular participation. But in Chile, people are organizing at the local level, have been for more than a year, and it is all happening from the ground up. So now my book kind of tries to give some guidelines of how to connect this popular power that is local into a more national endeavor.
Oh, that's really interesting. Have the government contacted you, or?
No. So the government is a right wing, and actually our president is one of the 10 richest people in the country, a billionaire. So and he was a fan of Donald Trump. So very kind of in the same idea of kind of business-like. And he introduced the credit card business in our country. That's how he made his money. So this is kind of like the leadership that we have. And he was forced into this project of constitution making. He didn't want to change it because our constitution institutionalized neoliberalism. So it's not just a policy of economics, but it's actually in the constitution. So for example, water is not a right, it's not something that we have, is actually privately owned. You can buy water, you know that the circulation of water you have, and you can buy it in perpetuity, and you can buy and sell in the stock market of water. So basically there's people that have nothing to drink in their communities, and they're being, buses and trucks are coming with water for them like daily, and they have a little allowance, while the corporations that have bought the water that is supposedly going to the community and are using them for crops or for mining, and there's nothing the state can do about it because it's a private good. So everything has been privatized in this country, and this is what they don't want to change. So they know that if they change the constitutional framework, this kind of material economic system that has been being fostered in the last 40 years is going to be dismantled. So the government doesn't want to change it. So at the end, it was pushed to be changed. And what they did, they imposed a 2/3 majority, supermajority for every article in the Constitution. So therefore, there's no way that the opposition is going to be able to pass any article in the Constitution without the approval of the right-wing conservatives. So kind of this is being blocked from the beginning. So I am advocating for popular power from below. So the government is not interested in what I have to say, and actually they don't want to. They don't want the common people to participate, because common people are asking for socioeconomic rights, for reproductive rights, so rights of nature, all these things that would be basically against industry, because here health, education, pensions, water, everything is privatized. So industry is there to lose if there's going to be socioeconomic rights.
Yeah, the rights, the fight for civil rights is strong all over the world, unfortunately. So at what age were you when you started to notice that the policies in your country or even in the US needed to fundamentally change?
Well, I come from a rather accommodated family. So, and to understand, Latin America is the most unequal region in the world. So here, oligarchy, the few having power and governing for their own interests, basically, has been a constant. Doesn't matter if we're in a dictatorship or if we're in a democracy. It doesn't matter. It's just transhistorical, the oligarchy. In the U.S., and I bring the idea that you're the first republic. There's more kind of an idea of that the story of the founding has been sacralized. It's almost like, revelation, and is revered as is like, revealed documents. And this is something that is posterior in a way. Of course, there are, and if maybe listeners are interested, is that, of course, people know this, but people forget that the 10 first amendments are amendments, that the Constitution, as it was at the beginning, was crafted, didn't have any individual rights. That was only an organization of power that was going to be, about elites being elected by the people, authorized by the people, but they would govern. So the Constitution was about how would they be, organizing their power. But the people was not even there, not even, it was, they're nowhere to be found in the text in a way. And it was a push from below in order to institutionalize this, individual rights into these 10 amendments. So it is, I think, even an oligarchy then was very powerful, even at the beginning of the founding in the United States, as it is in the majority of countries around the world. But then there's a story, and it becomes a myth of founding that it takes away all kind of like the things that we don't want to remember, and we put on a pedestal the things that were good, and we forget about the history. So part of what I do in the book is I devote a part to analyzing the founding of the United States, because it's the first democratic republic basically in the modern history. And I went to read James Madison's like 3,000 page notes of the Constituent Convention, of the Federal Convention. And and because I'm a historian by training, I just read it without any kind of like secondary literature. I just read the whole thing. And I was really appalled by the way that they were talking about democracy and about the people. Democracy was seen as a disease, something that was the worst, and that therefore what they were creating was not a democracy. It was explicit. It was a republic, which means a system in which representation takes place. That's it. There's no people, there's no really control over government. It's just the people authorizing. So in Latin America, that cannot be, the founding cannot be mythical in a way, because oligarchy has been a constant, and there's no kind of, the push from below never yielded, individual rights the way that in the US did, and people have a consciousness about their own rights. In Latin America, because of the way colonialism was founded in the way, how from the beginning there were kind of civilizations that were very hierarchical. So when the conquerors came, they just kind of replaced that hierarchical structure with another one, basically. So we haven't had any people's power government ever. And we don't have this consciousness that the Constitution is there to protect the people. It's just how things work. So there's no myth. So it was clear to me that this unequal distribution of power, it was not unique to Chile. And we can see it all over when you have a very class-based society, as it is the Chilean one. You can see that they're servants at home, basically. The indigenous populations do not have enough to eat, so they send, their young girls to work as domestic servants, and this is still today. Okay, so when I was growing up, this was, pervasive. So I saw this and immediately said, this is not correct. Whatever is holding this together, it needs to be abolished, it needs to be changed. So it was very early on, and then when I came of age, I actually never voted, because I understood that voting within a system that is reproducing these sources of inequality, socioeconomic, cultural, of gender, everything was there, that I was going to legitimize a system. So it doesn't matter which politician I was going to vote for, they were all going to reproduce the system, because in a way, this is how the system works. So I abstained from voting. And actually the only time that I have voted for someone is in my own union for a union representative. And that's it. I have never voted in my life anywhere else. So I think that I was skeptical of politics from the very beginning, the party politics, instead of like the real politics of the people.
Yeah, the communal kind of things. So how would you say that this differs from like an institutional betrayal, or would you say it's kind of the same kind of core thing?
Yeah, I think it is. There's no betrayal. There is a narrative. There is kind of like a propaganda put out, like we are with a democracy. We govern, we vote. But at the end, it's the way of selecting others to rule. And even if we have equal rights to be candidates, we really know that it's impossible for anybody to be a candidate without being in a party machine. And if you're in the party machine, you're part of the machine, and you're not independent. You're not a regular citizen anymore. You're part of it. So there's no way to do kind of institutional electoral politics without being part of the system itself that is reproducing these hierarchies. So I think it's very difficult for someone to maintain themselves independent, as Bernie Sanders have been for most of his life. But he's kind of like the what confirms the rule, something that is completely out there, there's no one like him almost. The majority of people, even if they come to power as being outsiders and being kind of like either representatives of the labor movement or teachers, or other kind of form of popular politics, when they are in Congress and they are paid six figures and they are in this kind of realm and they have to negotiate with others and they are all in the same boat, kind of, there is some kind of esprit de corps, this idea that there is the spirit of the group, that they bound them together. So they are part of the elite. So eventually they end up, getting completely detached from the base and becoming oligarchic. So this is what I argue is the systemic corruption of our governments. When governments, in a way, that the people that we select to rule over us and to be they're authorized by a majority, what they do is basically serve themselves and serve like the most powerful people in the country. And this is not against the rules. This is not bypassing the rules. This is through the rules. This is through the institutions. It's not illegal. And I think when President Trump was still in office, he was saying that, of course, he paid fewer taxes than his secretary, because this is the rules. He would be a fool if he wouldn't take advantage of what the system has to offer. And I think that is how the system works. And we need to understand that that is corrupt. Not because something is legal, it means that it's not corrupt. Imagine that campaign finance was illegal at the beginning of the 20th century. Lobbying was completely illegal. We have legalized corruption, and now we have lobbyists and lists. And, this is all transparent, but they still advocate for big corporations. So I think this is everywhere. It's not kind of a betrayal because it has never been true. It always has been kind of a narrative that is sold and that we buy because we have no other alternative. And we have been convinced that the people are not, they're ignorant, they don't understand the world, and that they don't have the expertise to rule themselves. They really have kind of make the people impotent in a way. They have fed us with this idea that government is for the elites that are authorized and they are virtuous and we should be proud of them and we should support them, instead of you have your own power. You should be able to either say no to things that you think are oppressive, that are hurting you, or make initiatives that are not being discussed, because the common sense of elites is really very different from the common sense of ordinary people. So I think we need to put the ordinary people's common sense in office instead of having the elites rule the world, which is going to basically is driving us to climate collapse. And even though we know that the common people are all in favor of, trying to conserve and not going into climate destruction, the elites keep enriching themselves because they are enriching themselves now, so they don't want to cut their profit in the future. So they have these paths for 2030, 2050, but they're not doing anything now because they don't want to hurt their own interests now. So I think if we're going to really change the direction of our governments, the people need to have a role and need to have power within the system in order to subvert, the domination that is happening.
Okay. So I've been doing research on memetic engineering. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Would you say that what you're saying would fit into that kind of framework of the memetic engineering theories?
Can you explain it to me, because I'm unfamiliar.
So basically, what memetic engineering would be a way of, because there's all these different type of isms, right? You know,
Mhm.
as a Black man, I always look at racism as being,
Mhm.
the number one thing that obviously affects me. But before there was racism, there was sexism. You have classism, and there's all these isms. So essentially, what memetic engineering is, so a meme is essentially a way to indoctrinate information into people. Now they do it through the graphics, but it can be really anything. It can be a book or just a song or whatever. So memetic engineering would be essentially that, but figuring out a way to, through your energy, could kind of making people around you be a little more aware of what they're doing.
Mhm.
So, for me, I guess it would, dealing with racism, you find ways to cope, and that's essentially what memetic engineering is figuring out ways to cope and having your situations around you not affect you
Mhm.
negatively to stop you from growing.
Hmm.
But it's
Yeah,
kind of, I
interesting.
just discovered it, so.
Yeah, I find it very interesting, and it's very kind of like how I live my life, because it is very difficult to be in an environment which is hostile to you without being hurt and without being determined by it in a bad manner. And of course, you could go against it and be better at it, But that those are the few people, the majority of people have to just bear and deal with it in a manner, and not really. Uh, they don't have an advantage of living in that very hostile environment. I think what I propose in the terms of like the people needs an institution is that we cannot deal with this hostile environment alone. The radical individualism which is sold to us, the idea that if we succeed in life, is because we're great and we basically we deserve, basically Jeff Bezos deserves all these billions of dollars that he makes in an hour because he's so great in a way. Or if you are poor and couldn't get a job, or got into whatever problem, it is your problem because you did something wrong, because you didn't put all your energy in it, because you were lazy. That's a classic. The poor are lazy. And it's like, of course, the people that say that have never even tried to live like someone of scarce resources, not even once. They wouldn't even survive one day in a way without all the help that they get because of their resources. So it is a very kind of demobilizing, disempowering narrative. And I think the only way to break through that narrative is to be together. Because when we are together and we start sharing our misfortunes and our limits and challenges, then we understand that it's not our fault, it's not my fault, it's not your fault, it's the system's fault. Because it cannot be that everybody is enduring the same things and they are all faulty in a way. It is how the system works. So again, that could give you at least the experience now in Chile with this constituent process, is that the people are creating their own local assemblies in order to first vent. This was the first kind of the first 3 or 4 months of the movement was people getting together to vent about their own experiences and to share and bring community together in a way to empower themselves, because individualism disempowers you. You are basically going into depression in your own home without seeking any help because you feel ashamed of yourself. You feel that you're a failure. But if you know that others are in the same boat, you feel that we need to be together in order to fight this hostile environment together. So this is something that needs to be done. We cannot do it by ourselves. It's not about just making, for example, decisions, the idea of, propositions in the ballot or, referenda, the idea that I would vote as an individual. Again, we are in the system. But if we are together, we can break through fake news. We can break through all the propaganda that they're feeding you, because we are in a conversation and acknowledging the different. So therefore, we have a new source of information that could be empowering. So in this way, I think is very similar to this memetic engineering that you were talking, but in a manner of the collective. That we need to do this collectively. That we cannot do it alone. Of course, you could survive, but that doesn't mean that you're going to have a good life. If we're going to just not survive, but actually be a good society and a just society that is going to eliminate or at least ameliorate, because I don't think we can eliminate the hierarchies and the domination that comes from this inequality. We can ameliorate it, we can control it. So therefore we need to be together and vigilant eternally. We cannot just like have like the good constitution or a good government and then, go and rest. No, in the moment that you have a good government, starts corrupting. The same as, an apple, the moment it's taken out of the tree, starts, rotting in a way. The moment something comes into life, starts rotting in a way. This is kind of like the idea that all bodies decompose. So the political body also decomposes, and all the limits that we have put to kind of keep oligarchy in honest, at least not overspilling and not overgrowing, they're porous right now. So therefore there's no limits to accumulation. There's no limits to power. We have legalized corruption. This is where we are. And the only way to fight this hostile environment is together.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I got one more question, and then I'll let you enjoy your day. What would you suggest for people that hear this to start making small changes in their life today to help fuel this movement?
I think there's two things that can be done today. One is it has to do with survival and with the everyday needs, because mutual aid in this time of COVID is very important. Even though we have to kind of distance ourselves, social distance, of course, is against kind of the movement, right? It's very difficult to actually engage in political action when we cannot even get together. But there are communities that are hurting, and there's always a way that we can help others without, getting infected or whatever. It's also kind of a caring for the community. So there are what is called in Latin America ollas comunes, which are like the common kitchen, the soup kitchen, right? That is in each neighborhood, basically. So they have like a common diner, if you will, that is just voluntary based. And it's not only that if you don't have food, because if you're a woman like me with small children and by themselves, you have to cook and clean forever, 24/7 for your children. You have no escape. But when you have a communal kitchen, you can at least rest on someone else and then give back. And there gives you kind of idea that you're not alone. Again, you as a woman, it's not like you are depressed and you're fed up with, domesticity. You understand that there are others like you, and we can actually support each other. So that is mutual aid, I think, is very important during this time. And then we need to understand that this has to kind of like have a replica of a political institution. So one institution for the basic needs of people, and the other is a political institution that could actually feed from these needs in a way, and kind of push back against the powers that be, and not only nurture the community. So in a way, have power. And for that, people can get together and create their own institutions. Basically start making decisions, even though they're not binding. You can organize at your own local neighborhood, and make a council that is just about, things are wrong, and we can just make decisions, and we can connect to others. And if it's something that could be could bring basically the political power of neighborhoods together, that would be beautiful. And part of what I do in the book is that think about the new infrastructure for the people. The political infrastructure for the people cannot be hierarchical as we have government, because government functions as an animal. We have a brain and we have extremities. What the brain says, the extremities do. So there's only one centralized command center. We as the people, we have all local assemblies would be a command center, if you will. So we need to organize ourselves as an organic plant, in the sense that all plants have all their leaves and roots have like little brain cells in a way in each root, and each root decides where to go to water, or the leaves to seek the sun. There's no central command in the tree. So I think we need to think about this infrastructure being connected in this manner. So therefore we need to kind of be protective of pluralism, of autonomy, and the respect of popular wisdom coming from the territories, from the lived experience of everyone, and not really homogenize the idea that the people are one. No, the people are multiple. And today, the people can be connected in a network. So therefore, I think that is kind of a base to start, that even if we cannot do it nationally, if we start doing at the neighborhood level, we can connect to other neighborhoods. And this could be done. It's not that difficult to do. It needs popular will and kind of a way forward. And it was going to be better than what we have today. So
I agree. Well, thank you. I look forward to